Like the Stirling 440 that I reviewed recently, today's subject is another older add-on from the Caledonia Works range, but she is by no means a dud. This is the Great Northern Railway Stirling Single, a locomotive that I've had in my TS collection for several years now, and despite liking this class a fair bit, I forgot I even had them installed until recently. But first, a brief history on the Stirling Single. This was a class of 422 tender engines designed by Patrick Stirling, with 53 examples built at Doncaster Works between 1870 and 1895. The design is characterised by the enormous 8-foot 1-inch diameter driving wheels, so as the locomotive's moving along, you could sing the refrain from the Creedence Clearwater Revival song Proud Mary, despite that song being about a paddle steamer on a river. As one might expect from a locomotive with one large set of driving wheels, the Stirling Singles were intended for express passenger services. Besides the Stirling Single, CW has also modelled at least 4 other single-driver steam locomotives for TS, including the famous Caledonian Railway 422 No. 123 and the rather obscure Great Eastern Railway P43 class. With the arrival of Henry Ivett's 442 Atlantic locomotives from 1898 onwards, the singles were displaced from top-of-the-line express trains. Although some examples, like 544 here, were rebuilt with domed boilers, withdrawals of this class still began in 1899. The final example was withdrawn from service in 1916, with all but one of these elegant locomotives being scrapped. The sole survivor happens to be GNR No. 1, the class leader. She's now part of the National Collection, and you can find her at the National Railway Museum in York, although she hasn't run under her own power since the 1980s. Weirdly, on at least 2 occasions, she's even been used in stage adaptations of The Railway Children. During the shows, she was shunted on and off the set by a Class 08, although the diesel was hidden from the audience's view. I dare say the specific 08 in use would not have been 08606. Quite fittingly, the National Collection also includes examples of later generations of ECML express locomotives, not just the Stirling Single. The specific locomotives in question are GNR C1 Atlantic No. 251, LNER A3 Pacific No. 4472 Flying Scotsman, which, in my opinion, looks better in apple green, LNER A4 Pacific No. 4468 Mallard, and Class 55 Deltic No. 55002, the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. It's a pity that the only Deltic model in TS is this ancient Kuju era thing, and that there are no Raven A2s in preservation to complement the Grizzly Pacifics. Thinking back to the C1 Atlantic, not to be confused with a tram class in Melbourne that is also called the C1, I'll be honest and say that I bought this locomotive primarily so that she could make cameos in this video. Going forward, I'm not sure if I'll make a dedicated video for the C1 Atlantic, but I'll probably use her for more random cameos as I see fit. We now return to discussing the Stirling Single. The Stirling Singles were released as an add-on for TS in January 2019, not long after the Caledonian Railway 498 class, another engine that I've reviewed recently. The old green 422 is still available to purchase from CW's website for a reasonable price of £15, or around 33 New Zealand dollars. You don't just get a preservation era version of GNR No. 1 with this pack, but also a trio of working days variants too. I don't know about you, but to me, these things don't half look weird when they've got a dome. As for the liveries, you only get Great Northern Railway green because this class didn't survive long enough to see service with the LNER, let alone British Railways. I wonder what this thing would look like in BR Brunswick green. From memory, you only got one tender type with this class upon its initial release. At some point since then, though I can't remember exactly when they did it, CW released an update for this pack which added the smaller tender. This is what the preserved engine was apparently paired with between 1938 and 2014. For the longest time, I was still running the previous version of the Stirling Single, and it wasn't until late January 2025 when I finally got around to downloading the updated version. And now I kind of prefer the little Sturrock tender over the larger Ivert tender. Originally, my preference was the other way round. As for the features you get on the Stirling Single, these are not as advanced as newer CW products, such as the London and South Western Railway T14 and London, Brighton and South Coast Railway G classes, but what you do get is still decent for an add-on released 6 years ago. The features include, but are not limited to, Performance Mode, which is toggled on or off by pressing Shift P, customizable GNR lamps, which are toggled on or off by pressing Control 1 through to Control 6, I think, a fully detailed boiler backhead, 3D firebox, dynamic smoke particles, and a good selection of cab camera views. I noticed that the selection of cab camera positions is not as extensive as you would see on newer CW products, but regardless, I think my favourite from the selection is this position where you're perched on top of the cab. Speaking of which, the design of this cab is rather unusual, in the sense that it lacks any side windows and offers sod-all weather protection for the crew. This rather primitive arrangement reminds me of the North Eastern Railway long boiler 060, another locomotive with a simple cab that you can find at the NRM. Besides number 1's preservation, another claim to fame for the Stirling Single was this class being the basis for Emily from Thomas the Tank Engine. One episode about the character that sticks out in my memory is Emily's adventure from Season 8, as unlikable as the title character is in that episode. In any case, I vividly remember the close-up shot of her safety valve bonnet and whistle, which was used when she got impatient at Trevor and Elizabeth. I've known about these locomotives for many years, but I can't remember if I found out about them solely because of Emily. Due to this model's less advanced scripting, compared to newer CW products, she doesn't feature a functioning reverser lock. Meanwhile, I noticed that the coal model in the tender doesn't go down as the locomotive uses up coal. This is barely noticeable as you're driving along, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. I also noticed an issue with the particle effects from the funnel not appearing all the time, and since I'm not sure how else to describe what was going on, I think it's best to let the footage speak for itself. Overall, the sound set on this engine isn't too bad, especially given that the recordings couldn't be taken from the real GNR number 1, for obvious reasons. The only issue I have with the sounds is the chuffing being a little off between 25 and 30 miles per hour. The whistles were apparently recorded from the preserved N2 class 060 tank number 1744, but I'm not sure what engine, or engines, the rest of the sounds were recorded from. During a test run from Annan to Gretna Green, on the Western Lines of Scotland route, I got the Stirling Single up to 64 miles per hour. Not the highest speed that these engines could apparently reach, but even then, I think 64 is still a decent speed for a design as old and, by modern standards, basic as this one. At the end of the day, and despite this locomotive's features not being as advanced as newer products, I still enjoy this rendition of the Great Northern Railway Stirling Single in Train Simulator. She's ideal for anyone who wants to build up a collection of National Railway Museum locomotives, or just have some more interesting pre-grouping locomotives to potter about with, such as the C1 class 442 and K1 class 080. I think the old Stirling engine deserves a 7 out of 10.